Hey everybody, Psychosaurus is here. Welcome back to Age of Empires Online, and today I think it's time we finish this gearing guides, videos, everything. Like, it's been a long ride, but it's time to finish this, and the next one will be with the Indians, which hopefully they will be coming out soon. Who knows when, but hopefully soon. But yes, I've already done every single unit for every single civ available right now. So now it's time to finally focus on the structures. And structures are very important, of course. We all build them, we all need them. Very important. And goddamn, I need to tell you, it's very hot in here. So I need to keep this short as usual. But as I know myself, it's gonna be for an hour at least. So let's get this over with as soon as possible. So starting with the number one structure, the most important one of them all, the town center. Now, for town centers, what I usually do would be the first two builds here. The idea behind these is, for me, town center can serve as an early game defensive structure. And usually what I see early game is like infantry. If it would be like cavalry, usually you're not afraid of cavalry because you have spearmen. If you see ranged units, you just need to outnumber them or use your TC, and usually ranged units don't have enough HP to survive. So those are not the problem. So yeah, usually I'm focusing on the anti-infantry. So before I was actually using this one, which was using the bow of Theseus, Arrows of Darkness, Walls of Kronos, and the Athenian Manual. So this one was the more anti-infantry focused. So of course, early defense, you see an infantry, the extra bonus against infantry, which would be like 20% if you got really good bow and arrows. It would help you, okay? That would be very useful for the early defense. If you have mainly the spearman, your H1, you see infantry, it would help you a lot. You can definitely try this for yourself on, let's say, Valley of Kings, for example, because you will see a number of infantry units coming early, like axemen, okay, and defending against them, definitely the bonus against them helps a lot. Although TCs are not like the most powerful defensive structure, they still offer some solid damage output. As you can see, like this TC, the base values are 38 DPS with like 20% extra against infantry. Now you have to remember, I don't have the upgrades here, and even if I had them, you cannot really see it, but when you age up, the TCs become stronger, so this should be like 1/3 more if you're in H2. So usually before the first waves in Valley of King comes, I mean in Bronze Age already, so my TCs are a little bit stronger, and that would be like 50 DPS, so like 60 DPS against Axemen. Yes, that's a lot. So that's why I was using this, but currently I switched the bow for the Finbar's Forgotten Bow, the one you get from Lodi, as a quest reward for completing every single legendary quest, I believe. I think that's the one. Yeah, I think you have the quest pack, the normal quest line, and then you need to finish every single legendary quest in that quest pack to get this bow. I think that's how it is. But yeah, you get this in Lodi. So why this one? Because this one offers a train research rate. I'll be honest, because it's like less than 2%, you will not really see the value here. I feel like it's so low that I barely even realize that I have this bow. I'll be honest, I would rather switch back to the bow of Theseus than keep having the Forgotten Bow. I'm just lazy to switch it back. But maybe I should do it, because I feel like the Theseus was a lot better for my build. Doesn't mean this is necessarily a bad bow, it's just not ideal for the way I'm playing it. That's what I mean. So yeah, these are the two ways. So the old one, which I might switch in the future back to, because I liked it a lot more than this one. But currently I'm using this one. It's okay. I think Finbar's bow is still okay to use. it's not only about like villagers, although like 2% you like barely notice it. Like you would need to train like 10 villagers to actually see, hey, you saved like 1 second. But remember, it's not always only about the villagers. Also the technologies, the upgrades you research at the town centers, including the age ups, definitely work well better with the Finbar's Forgotten Bow, because you can save a few seconds there and get them up and running sooner. So it definitely helps. But if I had to say like the most optimal that I would say I would use if I really wanted those items, so again, I would stick with the manual for the construction edition. For the walls, I would choose Vishwakarma. For arrows, I would choose Setredet's sacrificial arrows. And then for bow, I would choose the Bahram's bow. Now, why I feel like this is the best build for my TCs. So remember, you always have limited number of TCs. If you start in H1, you have only one single TC. If you're in H2, then usually you will have the one only TC until you gather enough resources for the second TC, and then you need to build the second TC. Meanwhile, you have only the one working. But even with like 2, you have limited number of TCs. That means you have limited production of villagers. And so you wanna, since you want as many villagers out as possible, the only way for you to manage that is reduce the villagers' training times and improve the town center's train research rate. And this is what it's mainly focused on. So the manual and Vishwakarma are those 2 huge buffs. And then there's also the Bahram's bow, which I completely forgot that this was giving the train research rate, but it was buffed. I remember that now. So you can see this is like 24% already right here in the train research rate, which is huge. Like villagers training in 12 seconds instead of 15, that's really huge. And Egyptians got it even better, because those villagers take 18 seconds to train one of them. But yeah, let's say I get actually a little bit better. You can see it's easily getting more than 25. Already showing like the 25%. I don't really know how rounded this is, but yeah, you can easily get to 25% here. Then there's the Setredet's arrows and the Bahram's bow, also reducing the cost. And I would say that's one of the biggest issues of TCs. They cost a lot of resources, like 300 wood, 300 stone, which is 600 in total. That's a lot of resources. So in my opinion, saving the resources is the best option. And at the same time, I would say these 2 items are like the best in the slot for the TC. Bahram's beloved bow, like, what other bow do you really want to put on TC? Because there's just, you have the weaker versions with just the cost. You have like the, I think it's Darius's dire bow, which is like the rare from skirmish chest, so super rare to get. Then there's the epic one, which is, I don't remember, it's like Perseus bow, which offers like 3% discount. It still works, like, but like for TC, these are like the only options, plus the Finbar's Forgotten Bow. So overall, Bahram's bow is, in my opinion, the best TC when you're trying to get the like discount and training time for your villagers. And then Setredet's, like, again, like, what are you gonna put on your TC? Setredet is practically the only arrow that has any effect other than like health damage, okay? Setredet has like the only effect. It's like the cost. It's there. I mean, you could say like line of sight. Who cares about line of sight when you have watch posts? So these would be like the most ideal items in the slots. And this is what kind of makes me angry about Setredet's arrows, that they are the only ones that are like affecting like cost of structures and units, of course. But like for structures, what are you really gonna put on your structures? We're gonna exclude like towers and fortresses, but like TCs, castellums, what are you gonna put on those structures? I feel like outside of Setredet's arrows, there's no other better choice, which is making me angry. And yet we have so many arrows. We have so many arrows. And so many that I feel like, why do we even have so many? Like, I'll be honest, the Ashur's arrows, like getting the calorie damage instead of building damage, sure, it's definitely a better option now that we have the piercing frost arrows. But at the same time, I'm like, why do we really need another like arrows of darkness like arrows? Like, why not just make it like, hey, give it some discount? Like, it does not have to be huge, but still, like some other alternative or like some other options I can put on these structures. Another choice that I would love to see would be like when you have these questline items like the Setret's arrows. It would be nice if you had like some repeatable quests where you can still get them again, so you don't have to keep them in the inventory because they are unique, or you just get rid of them and then never see them again. I don't know, it's kind of annoying that these arrows are the only ones. So yeah, Vishwakarma, Manual, Bahram, and Celeste, the most ideal. Now, alternatively, if you don't want Vishwakarma or you can't afford it, then of course we have some other alternatives that should also work pretty nicely. And I was thinking about this just now. So we have 3 options. So that would be the Architect, Hadrian, or Roman Concrete. So Architect, which is cost and build time, Hadrian would be cost, and the Roman Concrete would be the build time. So all of these 3 seem to me as a good alternatives to the Vishwakarma. Of course, if you can't afford Bahram, go with the weaker versions if you can get them. Otherwise, yeah, don't feel bad. It's like, it's very hard to get those items, but you should be fine even without the Bahram's bow and like the discounts. Do what I do, put in the defensive ones. That's why I'm using those. but yeah, for the walls, like I was thinking, which one would be better? I'm just gonna keep it short. All 3 of them are very good. Pick whichever one you want, put it there, keep it. If you wanna like do the math, you can. But I'm telling you, it's gonna like, the optimization. I can see it like taking quite a while because you have so many factors in there, like what tools you have on your villagers, what milestones you're using, what advisors you're using. Like there's so many things you need to include in there that I don't really want to go into it that deep. But if I had to say it in short, all of them are good. Pick whichever you want and keep using that. If you want to optimize, do the math. I'll be honest. When I was thinking about it, I was thinking maybe the Roman concrete wall would be slightly ahead, maybe. But then I was thinking maybe it's on the same level as Hadrian, and at that time I'm like, okay, I would have to literally do the math, and I feel like that would take such a long time. I don't really want to do that. So if anyone wants to do it, please make a video about it. What do you feel like is the best option here? Because I don't really want to do it, and I'll be honest, it's just gonna be a lot of work. So pick whichever of these 3 you want. Those are the other alternatives that I have. So yeah, that would be the thesis. As I said, 2 options. You can go more defensive variant or more focus on the villager production and more focus on the economy. So whichever you prefer, go with it. I'll be honest, the defensive one, it should be a little bit easier to get. It should be cheaper. Remember, there are also weaker variants of these items. You don't have to go like straight for legendary. If you get the epic ones, those should be just fine. I think only the darkness don't have those, but whatever, you can just go the Delian Perceptor arrows or the Octaeon arrows from the Cypress store. All of them should be fine. So pick whichever you like, go with it. Of course, this one is a lot more expensive. That's what I'm gonna say. So yeah, that's TCs. Moving on, we have the production structures. And I got barracks only here, but you can include like stables, archery ranges, temples, all of them. Just here, you can include them. Like, it's gonna be pretty much the same. So yeah, starting with something I usually use for my barracks and practically any other production building, it would be Walls of the Architect and the manual. Pretty standard. It offers slightly cheaper production buildings. They are built slightly faster, and at the same time they produce a little bit faster, which can be useful on a lot of structures. Some structures might not need it as much. Like for example, you don't need it as much on Egyptian barracks, for example, because Egyptian barracks units like are trained so fast. Like the Egyptian spearman is super fast. Axeman is relatively fast. Slinger with the champion upgrade, I feel like they're pretty fast. Plus you get the barracks tax that also improve the train times of your units produced there. So barracks might not need the training manual that much, but at the same time, before you get those tax, your infantry units might take a little bit of time to produce. Okay, so that's why I still kind of prefer to have the train research time on my barracks. But yeah, you would definitely like it on archery ranges, although maybe not that much. If you just have enough ranged units and just create a death ball of ranged units, you might not even lose that many, so the training time might not be that necessary at that point. But for the stables, I feel like for stables this is ideal because cavalry units usually take a long time to produce. So in my opinion, this is the most ideal one for stables. For barracks it's okay, for archer ranges it's okay, for siege workshops it's okay. So pretty standard. This is what I'm usually using. Now one alternative, and in this case it's gonna be for the barracks, and this is gonna be about the Norse barracks. Instead of the architect, I am trying to use the Roman concrete walls because I can use my Norse infantry and Norse scout to build my barracks. So at that point, saving 20% of the build time is actually huge because Norse infantry does not have any other way to improve the build times, excluding the advisors, of course. So if I had to improve it directly through the gear, Roman concrete walls make a lot of sense in this scenario. So yes, you can do that. Alternatively, you could also put like blueprints, but for Norse, the infantry units usually take a long time to produce. Like if you take a look at their training times, those are very long training times actually. So I feel like the manual there actually makes sense. So that's why I prefer this way. And then we have the Castellum for the Romans, and Castellum has one advantage because it has 2 extra slots. So ideally what I would imagine on Castellums would be the Bahram's bow, again, cheaper Castellums plus higher train rate. Then the Ceteret's arrows for the cheaper Castellums. And then in my case, I'm using Hadrian's Wall. My build is slightly different because I don't have the Bahram's bow. Instead, I'm using the Ollor's all-seeing bow for the line of sight. Because I feel like that I don't really want to put any other bow there. I just want to have some legendary there. So yeah, in my opinion, I prefer customs this way because I still am looking at them like barracks. I don't want to give them any extra advantage over the other barracks. It's already enough. I have the Cetret's arrows there for cheaper customs, so I kind of hate it. But yeah, what I'm using is the Hadrian's Wall. The reason being, Romans have access to engineers, so they don't need that extra build time from the Walls of the Architect. So in this scenario, I'm actually going for a little bit cheaper castellums because my engineers can build them fast. Why? Because they have the tools for that, which improve their build time by 50%, which puts them on the level of four villagers. So With the engineer, it would be like, hey, I'm already building this at 25 seconds. And then you get the upgrade from the forum and suddenly it's even faster, okay? So in my opinion, it's just better to go with the better discount here. Now, obviously, Vishwakarma would be option here as well for all of these structures. So that's why I have this right here prepared. This would be the Vishwakarma. Now, remember, this is like all the military production. So whatever you see here, you might even try on the other military productions, excluding the Castellum with the bow and arrows, of course, just the walls and the manuals. So usually manual, but yeah, alternatively you can do something like Vishwakarma with the manual. This I would recommend on the siege workshops mainly, because usually I don't go for too many workshops. I build like 2, sometimes 3, sometimes maybe even go for 4. But yeah, usually I don't build that many, so for me, like, saving the resources, the time, that much does not make too much sense, and instead I just want to get my siege units out as soon as possible. And with this train research rate you get here, you can see it's more than 20%. I reduce the train time by 1/6. Okay, so that means ballista, which would take me 30 seconds, with this gear will now take me 25. So like 5 seconds savings on one single ballista. That's pretty huge if you ask me. If I need them as soon as possible, then this is definitely gonna help me a lot. Alternatively, as I mentioned, the Egyptians, if you are using Sobek H4 advisor, then you can obviously go for something like, let's see, usually I have like Divine Hammer of Construction, so I don't need that much like build time. So it would be like either Hadrian or Walls of the Architect, and then I just switch the manual, or it could be the Joints of Architect, Persepolis, whichever you prefer, like one of these two. You could actually change it there for the Egyptians. Similarly, you could say the same thing about like the archer ranges. Maybe you don't really lose that many ranged units, so at that point you could just go with like Joints of Architect, Persepolis, whichever you want. So that could be also alternative. Stables, usually I would stick with this, because stables are more expensive than your typical barracks, like 50 more wood for one stable. That actually means a lot. So yes, I would stick with the Architect and the manual. Again, cavalry units take quite a while to produce. Then we have the dogs, which I would still stick with this one. Although dogs are a little bit cheaper, it's not that bad. They don't take too long to build. They take like 30 seconds each. So you could probably replace the Architect with the Vishwakarma there as well, because naval units actually do take a long time to produce. And even if you don't go for like triremes or any other battle navy, you still, if you go for the fishing boats, that's actually huge. Like fishing boats, like with this gear, suddenly saving 5 seconds on them per fishing boat, that's really huge. Merchant transports, again, like saving again 5 seconds per merchant transport, that's actually really huge. So you could actually put this on the docks. This would be very nice, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Docks are cheap, except for Babylonians and Romans. Those are the only exceptions. So those, you might go with this, but also you might go with this. Then there are also temples. Now temples, that's up to you, to be honest. Like, you can go the classic, which is again something I have. Temples are a little bit more expensive. You could go with this if you just go like one temple and that's all you need. Now obviously this includes like all the temples, like I'm talking about like Temple, Ziggurat, Templum, Forum, all the temples for Egyptians, like all of these. Sacred groves, like imagine sacred groves actually with this gear, those actually do cost like 150. And if you have the H2 advisor for the sacred deer and cheaper sacred groves, even better. Like those sacred deers getting out faster, ooh, that's gonna be a lot of food for you. That actually doesn't sound that bad now that I think about it. Hmm, not bad actually. That actually sounds like an idea. Ooh, that has to be interesting. Man, I should try it sometime. If I get the Vishwakarma wall, I need to try that. I hope I'm not forgetting anything. Yeah, in case of Egyptian temples, I actually have slightly different builds because I go, if I'm not mistaken, I go with the Persepolis on the Temple of Ra, and then I go with Joints of Kaveh on Set and Ptah, because usually I just build those temples because I need to age up, and you wanna use as many villages as possible, like those structures. Like the set is not that bad, but like the Ptah, it takes forever, and anyway it takes like 3 minutes, so you need all those villagers there to build that temple. So, and it's also very expensive, so if I wanted to build more temples, whew, that would cost me, but at the same time I could go with like Sesostris H4 and make the temples cheaper, so I could switch it probably for something like Persepolis and just not increase the build time at that point, but still Temple of Ptah takes a long time. So yeah, it's just alternatives, okay? But yeah, so standard works always. This is something specific for Norse you can do because of their infantry units. But I still feel like I'm using more villagers than the infantry to build the forward bases, so this would make sense, but at the same time, if I use this mainly for the early game, so I don't have to waste my villager work time, this makes sense. Romans, of course, they are OP with their castellums. Then obviously we have some alternatives. And remember, this is all production, so dogs, archer ranges, you have alternatives. Don't be afraid to try them out, okay? Moving on. I feel like I should have something different, but yeah, these two would be very important. This one is slightly less important, but it is still very useful structure. Watch posts. Now I should have also like the outposts for the Norse, but basically the same thing. It's just slightly more expensive, a little bit bigger structure, whatever. Watch post. The main reason we have the watch post is the line of sight. They have the greatest line of sight, excluding the fortresses, of course. But if you compare this to a fortress, you'll see it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot faster to build than your typical fortress. So the main reason we have these structures is for the line of sight. They have the highest line of sight, or second highest, but if I compare the cost, this is much more worth for the line of sight. I believe the basic value was like 38, fortress has like 44. I feel like it also depends on the fortress, whatever. But yeah, watch posts, line of sight. That's why defender and lookouts of Olympus. There's nothing else needed to say. You just want to see as far as possible. The bigger the radius, the better. Plus, once you get the upgrade, it's even better. Like, look at that. It's really huge. Like, 100 line of sight, that's really huge. This is the best thing you can get on watch post. I don't think there's anything else. Like, usually you build watch posts later. You have like this one in your main base, so you like reveal your base area, and then when you are building the watch post forward, like revealing the rest of the map, that's late game. You at that point you have more than enough wood, so 75 wood for one watch post should not be too much, to be honest. So you should not really worry about like costs, build time, like 10 seconds, come on. You also have gears, so once this goes down like to 8 seconds, it's not that long to build one watch post. So obviously defender, Olympus, line of sight, reveal the big area. That's the reason these structures exist. That's all I have to say. Moving on. Now I put this together, so these are the towers and fortresses. So start with the tower, the one I'm using, Bow of the Master Hunter for bow, Arrows of the Ice King, Walls of the Piercing Frost, and Blueprints of the Piercing Frost. So the reason, first the bow and arrows, you want the maximum range. Towers are stationary structures, of course. They are staying in one place, so they cannot do what units do. They cannot decide to go and attack the enemy unit when they want to. No, towers are staying in place. So the only way for them to reach targets further away is by improving their maximum range. That's the only way you have. So that's why Master Hunter for the highest maximum range. And then Arrows of the Ice King. Of course, you can go other alternatives as well. I prefer this one so I can keep the enemies at distance because of the snare. It keeps them away from the towers so they don't attack the towers, and every single tower, excluding the Greek ones, have a minimum range. Okay, so once the enemy units get close to the towers cannot fight back. So you want to keep them away for as long as possible so the tower does as much damage as possible. So that's why Arrows of the Ice King. Of course, you can go with other alternatives. You can go Darkness with more focus against infantry. You can go Assures with more focus against cavalry. You can also go Piercing Frost, but because I'm already using the walls and blueprints, there is not really, it's not really that needed to go with that in my opinion. So just do whatever you want. If you want to counter Navy, yes, you can go Commontorius as well. Basically, go any arrows with maximum range. That's what I would say. Bow, Master Hunter. You could go also Marduk, but I don't like Marduk because towers are already attacking fast enough. I don't see a reason for Marduk on towers. But yeah, walls, of course. Alternative would be the Chronos or weaker version. Basically, maximizing the damage output. Usually you will have units protecting your towers so they don't take any extra damage, so you don't have to worry too much about health, and it should be focused on the damage output. Now I prefer the Ignore armor here because I feel like I want to destroy the units that have the Pierce armor because those feel as a greater threat. And let's be honest, if you see a battering ram, you want to destroy it as soon as possible. That's why the Ignore armor makes a lot of sense. Same goes for the blueprints, and since these blueprints are the only ones that can improve your damage output anyway, so that's practically the only option for towers. But if you want alternative, the Delian ones, Delian Archons blueprints, instead of damage will offer you health, which works very nicely in my opinion. Alternatively, you can also go with cheaper towers or faster build towers. So Joints of Persepolis, Joints of the Architect, blueprints, whichever you like. But basically focus on the maximum range and damage output as much as possible. That's my opinion. Now for the fortress, what I'm usually using right now is I have the Marduk's bow there, I have the Arrows of the Ice King, I have the Olympus, and I have the blueprint of the Delian Archon. So why do I have this? Because I decided just I want to put the bow and arrows there. It was during the event, so I was like, yeah, maybe it's gonna be cool. But I'll be honest, Marduk is okay, but the Arrows of the Ice King, you don't really want that. If you want to know why, you should watch my video about the snare. In short, the snare is being applied only to the main target, okay? So it's not really worth putting Arrows of the Ice King here. You could go Piercing Frost, because that can be actually good, but careful with that because you might actually cut down some trees, and then might not be the best situation, to be honest. So what I would actually aim for my fortress, it would be both of the Alexander's Ornate, Arrows of Germanicus, Walls of Olympus, and Delian Archon's blueprints. Reason, usually the damage output is dealt by the towers, so the fortress should be the meat shield for your towers. That's how I describe it. It should be the meat shield. Now of course you could go with walls, but not everyone has like the best walls in the game. So for example, if you go like Celts, you just have those weak walls. So at that point you could do something like this. where the fortress, you can see it, like 21,000 health. Ooh, that's a lot. Plus the bonus damage protection that definitely helps a lot. So yeah, in this case, the fortress should serve as a meat shield. In here, it works as well. It's just slightly worse on the HP, but a little, well, only slightly better on the damage output, but it also has some range, so I can attack from distance. This is a little bit limited because of the range, so careful with that, okay? So you might actually replace something like the arrows of Germanicus with, I mean, it could be still like piercing frost, but pick whichever arrows with range you would like then. So that would be like my biggest recommendation for the fortress. Just make sure they survive for as long as possible, so they actually, yeah, serve as a meat shield for your guard towers. Now there's one alternative, and that would be the Egyptians, because Egyptians mainly use fortresses for their elephant army. Yay. Now of course you could do this on any other fortress as well if you want to produce Palintorons, or in case of Celts and Norse, their rams as well. You could go with something like this. So Bahram's bow, cheaper fortresses, faster production, makes sense. Settlerads, again, cheaper fortresses, not necessary, but very useful if you need it. Vishwakarma, alternatively you could go again like Architect, Hadrian, Roman Concrete, those work as well. But yeah, Vishwakarma for the train research rate. This is mainly for the Egyptians, and elephants take quite a long time to produce. Could be also Palintorons, those also take quite a long time to produce. Then of course manual. So this is more focused on the production and having as many fortresses as possible. So cheaper, faster production. Definitely could be useful on Egyptians, since, like I said, war elephants, try to get them out as soon as possible. Could be useful on Norse for Farby orders, for example. Or you might want like some big number of log throwers, that also works. Same for the Celts. So yeah, this is another alternative there is. I would not really go for it, but if you're going for Egyptians, you might find this very useful. So if you want it, go grab it. But it's expensive, okay? Careful with that. Definitely look for weaker items if you can. Like epic ones, rare ones, whichever you find, if you can find those. Those can be useful. But yeah, that's tower and fortresses here. Moving on, those would be the text structures. So when I talk about text structures, it would be armories, it would be, let's say, Greek Academy, Roman Forum, which also serves as a temple for your priests, so you can produce priests there as well, but you could include the ziggurat as well, just like the Forum. You could include War Academy to a certain degree, just like Forum. You could and you should include the Bard Hall, just like Academy. So text structures, you build them, you research some text. Obviously this depends what text you have available to you, because if, for example, if you have Greeks with the Greek Academy, you research the philosophy, suddenly you don't really spend too much time researching the text. So at this point you could just put some other gear there, for example architect walls and architect joints, and basically it's not a waste. Like, you reduce the research time by 40%. That's actually really huge, okay? So that should definitely be very nice for you. But of course, not everyone is Greeks. So usually what I do on my armory is I may put here like architect, the walls of the architect, so I make them cheaper, I make them built as soon as possible, and then the joints, the rust joints, for the faster build time as well as faster train research rate. You could switch, like for example, for the manuals if you want those texts as soon as possible. Now in case of armory, it kind of makes sense to have some extra train research rate, because you have like 12 tags in total. Each of them takes more than 1 minute, 1 minute or more I should say. If I remember, first tier is like 1 minute, then it's 80 seconds, then it's 100 seconds for the last tier. So a lot of time you're gonna spend researching with your armories. So it kind of makes sense to have like some extra train research rate. You don't have to be honest. You don't have to. You can just still go with like joints of the architect or Persepolis or blueprints, whichever you prefer. But train research rate from the joints, it makes sense. If you have the manual, you can put the manual as well. You can. You don't have to. Okay. It's definitely nice. You could also include like Vishwakarma here, but I feel like that's kind of overkill because I mean you can just build like second armory and like research 2 texts at the same time, which is something I usually go for. So I feel like this is ideally the best, but of course I'm not saying it's the most optimal. I think it works fine for me, but obviously you should try an experiment, to be honest. I might not have the best builds, but definitely there are many options. Academy, like I said, this you have in this case you have the philosophy, but let's say you have actually the Bard Hall for Celts, you don't have philosophy, right? In this case it also makes sense. Why? Because in Bard Hall you research only 3 texts, only 3. That's not that many, to be honest. So putting the train research rate on something like Bard Hall does not really make sense to me, because at that point you research the 3 tags, but how much time did you actually save? One is like 30 seconds. I think they are 30 seconds. I don't remember. Is it 30, 30, 60? Or is it 60, 60, 60? I don't remember. At the same time, it's just not that much, okay? It's like 10% of that. So if I had to research for 3 minutes, okay, I saved 18 seconds, but does it really make that a huge change? Or huge difference? I don't think so. Academy, same thing. Like you have the philosophy, which makes it even better. So you have like 2 texts that take 30 seconds and like 3 texts that take 60, but you reduce the total time by 40% with philosophy. Well, not total time, because philosophy is one of those 30 seconds, but most of the time, yes. And it affects every other structure as well. So in this case, I feel like it's just better to go with the cost, build time, whichever you prefer. It could be Hadrian walls, it could be the Roman concrete, it could be the Persepolis, whichever you prefer, okay? That's up to you, but that's what I feel like about these text structures. Now there's a forum. Of course, I mentioned forum as a production building. You can still think about it as a production building. You could put in the architect and the manual and just make sure you pump out those clinica as soon as possible. It definitely helps with tech research as well. So it depends how you look at it. So you can look at it as a production building, or in this case, you can still look at it as a text structure. Now, if I looked at it as a production building, yes, manual, and then I can also research the text faster. But in this case, I have the Hadrian's Wall and the joints of Persepolis. Again, that's because in this case it's for the Romans, and in this case you have engineers, so you build very fast, so the cost will matter more. If I focus more on the production, then yes, I'll have the manual. I could include the Vishwakarma as well, although maybe not as necessary. But usually I'm fine with the one single forum, and I do all the tags in that one forum. Again, there's like, what do you have there? You have the SPQR, which is 30 seconds. Then you have the construction speed for engineers, health region for villagers and engineers, and then you have 3 another tags. So definitely there's a lot of text at the forum. So you could definitely try going for the manual. It definitely makes sense, but this one is up to you. Like I said, you can look at it as a production structure, then take a look at those production buildings and get inspired here. You can look at it as text structure and get inspired over here with the academy or armory. That would be it. Similarly, Ziggurat. You could, although for me Ziggurat, I'm using it more as a production structure, because I'll be honest, like training clinicals is nice, but it's annoying to like micro them. Whereas the priests for the Babylonians, also you have to remember there's a lot of text plus you age up through the ziggurat, so it would make sense to have it. But at the same time, it could be like, I want to get the ziggurat out as soon as possible, so make it cheaper and build it faster. Also makes sense. You can do that. And as Babylonians, you have access to gardens, so it would make sense through that as well. Maybe I should change it. Maybe I should change it for the ziggurats. Why not? Actually makes sense. I should probably do that. Would make sense. Yeah, I also mentioned War Academy. If you're using it mainly for the tags, there are only 3 tags, so it's not that much, but at the same time you can use it as a production for the Magi. So I feel like it would make sense more as the production building. But if you're using it as a tech building mainly, then yes, this makes sense as well. So yeah, that's what I said. Like, some structures can be looked at as tech structures when they are production, so you can get inspired here as well. But yeah, we have the tech structures, we have the armories, which are always there. We have structures like Academy or Bar Hall, which have some text, but it's not like too many. So you have options, rather to go cheaper, build faster than going for the manual. Nobody's stopping you going with manual or the joints. It's your choice, okay? You can always prefer it. I feel like this way it makes more sense. It feels a little bit better. Okay, that's the text structures. Hopefully explained well. It's getting hot. It's very hot in here. Goddamn. Moving on, houses. So houses, of course, we need them. We need the population. We want to build them as soon as possible and get them. We need them, okay? So typical house I have, walls of the architect, joints of the architect. Cheaper, build them faster. That's what I usually do. Obviously we have the alternatives. We have the, again, Hadrian. We have the Roman concrete. We have the blueprints and joints of Persepolis. So all of these are like alternatives. Pick whichever you prefer. I still prefer this one, although when I was making the build versus the cost, you should check that out. Actually, it's a lot of numbers, but it might be like helpful here to watch that first. But yeah, this is what I usually do. I feel like the more optimal would be something like this, but as you can see, yeah, it's like 2 resources versus 1 second save, not including the villagers gear, so it's hard to tell, okay? But I feel like the cost would make more sense here because the gear would obviously affect this more. You can see this is like 2 resources. Can you imagine if you have Kavek? This would be like 11 seconds versus like 12 seconds. Again, like the difference is not there, okay? It's not that huge. So this is alternative, that will be the walls of the architect and joints of Persepolis. This is something I'm using on Celts because I want to get those houses out as soon as possible, as cheap as possible. Because through house, you need the houses to age up. So the wood cost of the age ups is actually moved to the houses. So in this case, as Celts, you can actually make your aging up cheaper by putting gear on your houses. That's why I have them as cheap as possible, pretty much. But if you use this, it also makes sense. It's always up to you, okay? But it's one of those alternatives that I'm using. Third alternative that I'm using, this is for Romans, again, because Romans have engineers. So instead of architect, I would recommend Hadrian's Wall. And for the joints, I'm using joints of Kavek. Why? Because engineer builds so fast that, sure, you will see like it's slower, but it's not that bad. At least the houses are much more cheaper. That's pretty much the idea. But yeah, if you don't like the idea of the Kavek, you can definitely go with the Persepolis. Sometimes I'm still building the houses with villagers, so it would make sense to have the Persepolis rather than Kavek. But both should work just fine. And then obviously there's also the Norse Longhouse. This one I did not really put the gear here because I was like, maybe I should. It's pretty much like you can still choose one of these three. It would make sense because if we take a look at the longhouse, it costs twice as much wood than your normal house, but builds only 5 seconds longer, which is like 1/3 more, 33%. So for long houses, I would say it's a little bit more important to focus on the cost than the build time, because if you compare this to the houses, I mean, imagine like putting the build time on your house and it would have to take you like 10 seconds to build a house to make it equal to the long house, okay? So in case of long house, it would make more sense to focus on the cost. So it would be like Hadrian plus Persepolis, and it would be still very good, because can you imagine? Let me just add here like one more house. And let's put here the Roman concrete and the blueprints. How much do they take? See, even with both of these gears, the longhouse is practically taking less time to build than this house, okay? So in this case, it's just straight up better to focus on the cost. So it will be like Hadrian, and then, where are you? Hadrian and Persepolis, and it would be probably the best option on the long houses. You can see like this house, yeah, not even close, not even that close. So that would be the long house, okay? This is something I would recommend on long house. Of course, usually I'm going again for the architect and the joints of the architect as well. It's fine. It should work. Basically, look at it as a normal house, okay? That's all I have to say. But yeah, cost, build time. How you combine it, it's always up to you. So that will be the house. Now, moving on, we have the storehouse, and here I would say storehouses are better to be focused a little bit more on the build time, because their base build time is 30 seconds. So having a little bit more build time actually makes more sense. So I'm still using the joints and walls of the architect, but that does not stop you from using, let's say, the blueprints of Khufu. It does not stop you from using the Roman concrete. It does not stop you. I feel like it's just better. You should still combine it. So try to focus, like, let's say you go Roman concrete. Let me actually put it here. Let's say I go Roman concrete and I go joints of Persepolis. What does it look like? So remove this. So if we take a look at this, it's slightly more expensive, but also it's built faster. So if I had to say, this would make more sense than this. So whichever you can get, yeah, pick one. Doesn't matter that much, as you can see. It's not a huge difference. Like, you see like 2 seconds here, but you have to remember gear also reduces the build time when you have the right tools on your villagers. So the difference is actually gonna be a lot smaller, but it's still gonna be there, but it's not gonna be that huge, okay? So pick whichever one you want and go with it. I would say it's better to go with the cost, because it makes more sense in the early game. Since you have limited resources, you don't have that many villagers, you still want to build some storehouses. So I would say I would still stick with this, maybe Hadrian's Wall and joints of the Persepolis, whichever you choose. But yeah, still focus on the cost here in this case, I would say. Later, it's not that huge, okay? And I have this alternative here, and in this case, this is actually for in case you're using the Roman milestone for cheaper storehouses, the supply lines, because that way you actually make the storehouses a lot more cheaper. So you could actually go something like Roman concrete and joints of the architect. You could also go like straight up for Khufu as well, and you can see it's still cheaper but build much faster. So if you're using this milestone, you can definitely focus more on the building time. Even for early game, it will make more sense. So just so you know, if you're using this milestone, this actually can have some effect on your storehouses. So yeah, moving on. 2 structures here, farms and wonders. I put them here. just because everyone has those, and well, whatever. Farms, you need them if you want to gather food later in the game once you run out of huntables, bushes, fishing spots. Farms are your only food source unless you want to buy the food from the market. So farms, focus on the cost, because farms cost 100 wood, take only 20 seconds to build, just like the longhouse. So it should be more focused on the wood. So that's why I have the architect here, the walls of the architect. Of course, you could say, why not Hadrian? That's because I'm using the joints of Kaveh. And because joints of Kaveh increase the build time, the architect actually makes sense to slightly lower the penalty of the high build time. Now, why am I using this on my farms? Farms are actually one of those structures that have the easiest spread of villagers. You spread the villagers on as many farms as possible, so each farm can be built by one villager, which is like the best value you can get. And farms are the best structure for this because they have actually special ability for that. When you order the villagers to farm from a farm, and there are like few farms that are not finished, then those villagers will go for those farms and build them. There's also another trick. Maybe it's in some other video, I will talk about it. But yeah, that's why I have the joints of Kaveh. If you don't like the higher train time, Persepolis, okay? Build time should not be a problem for your farms. It should be the cost. Because 100 wood and you build like, I mean, log houses you build like 12, okay? That's not that bad. That's 1200 wood. But farms, I usually need like more than 30, and that's more than 3000 wood. So if I lower the cost by like 20%, in this case almost 25%, like quarter down, that's 750 wood. That's huge, actually. That's actually huge. Although it's slightly lower, so it's gonna be like 700, but I'm also using the Celtic Mudstones for cheaper farms, so it's gonna be even more for me. But yeah, focus on the cost for your farms. That's what I say. And Wonder is totally up to you. What I usually use, Hadrian plus the joints of Kaveh. I'm trying to focus more on the cost because that's usually where I have the problem in the early game, but sometimes the problem can be even later. So for example, if I go for Fabi, the cost is definitely huge. But of course, I would also like to build it as soon as possible. So instead of the Kaveh, I could be using the joints of Persepolis. That would also make sense. But yeah, I'm focusing more on the cost, but of course, again, it's up to you. You can go walls of the architect, Roman concrete, joints of Persepolis, joints of the architect, the blueprints of Khufu. It's up to you, okay? In case of Wonder, it does not really matter that much, but if you're doing some quests like Fabi or Alia, then make sure you put the right gear on your Wonder so you actually manage to do the time challenge, okay? That's all I'm gonna say about the Wonders, but this is what I'm using. And then we have, this is nothing, it's just something I was searching. This is the last one, and these are like specific structures for specific civs. So I have the gold mines here. So gold mines, you build them on a gold mine and you mine more gold from them because of the higher conservation, which is very nice. So basically, usually you build gold mine with multiple villagers. You don't send one villager to build the gold mine. No, you keep sending you either send the large group or you just rally the villagers from your TC there. So you will build with multiple villagers. But basically, my focus here is just make the gold mine cheaper. It doesn't really matter if you build it a little bit longer or, well, it does matter, but at the same time, like, I don't really care enough. So in my opinion, architect with Kaveh, just like with the farms, make them as cheap as possible. Architect reduces the penalty of higher build time. Of course, you can still go everything as I said before, which would be architect, Joints of the Architect, or Persepolis, Roman concrete walls, whichever you like. It's always up to you. Again, it's up to you. But yeah, make them cheaper if you want to build them faster. It's up to you. Gold mines are just there. It's not like super necessary, but it can be useful once in a while to use them. So why not equip them? Moving on, Millenarium for the Romans. Millenariums are built only by the engineers. So usually you build them, or at least I build them like late game. Maybe I build like 1 or 2 in my base, so I have like faster infantry and reinforce the front line as soon as possible. But that's like 1 is more than enough. Okay, so my focus on the Millenarium is like make them as cheap as possible. So Hadrian plus the Kalech, that's the focus. I built them in the late game, so the build time does not really matter for me that much. Plus you build them with the engineers, so the build time is not that bad. And basically I'm trying to focus to build them as cheap as possible, but of course you could focus on the build time, go with Architect or Roman concrete, and then just blueprints or Architect. Again, it's up to you. It's always your choice, okay? I just feel like here it makes sense because Romans have engineer. Now someone was actually talking about line of sight build on Millenariums. Now when I saw the basic line of sight, I was like, okay, I kind of see it, but at the same time, watch posts have like 50% higher line of sight. It doesn't make sense. It does not make sense to me. Like, why would I go with Millenarium when watch posts have like 50% more, I should say, higher radius of line of sight? And remember, this is radius, so if I had to cover this whole circle, the watch posts are actually covering more than double the area. It just doesn't make sense for me to put the line of sight gear on the Millenarium. And at the same time, usually you need to build the Millenariums close to each other, so the aura effect for the movement speed basically stays active on your army the whole time they are traveling. Okay, that's what you usually try to attempt. So most of the time the Millenariums will be just close to each other. That how much extra area would you reveal with the another Millenarium? That's what I mean. That's why I don't like it. I just feel like build a Millenarium for the movement speed. You will need to build some numbers, so make them cheap. Leave the line of sight to watch posts. That's my opinion. Watch posts, I mean, again, Millenariums and watch posts usually I build at large numbers when in the late game, when the wood should not be a problem. So the cause at that point is like, yeah, you could argue against my Millenarium with this, but it doesn't really matter, to be honest, with Millenariums. It doesn't matter what you put there. But yeah, it's usually for the late game, so I don't like the line of sight. It just feels like I build one Millenarium, then I build close enough, and they just cover each other. Sure, if the enemy started destroying those Millenariums along the way, it would definitely be nice to see, to keep most of the map revealed. But usually you don't want that to happen, okay? So don't do it. That's my opinion. You can do whatever you like, but I said what I said. I just don't feel like it's correct. Okay, final structure, the garden for the Babylonians. Now, if you know, gardens, the more you build, the more expensive they are. So if you have this cost, this is where it starts, so 50-50. You build the first garden, the second one will cost, I believe, 60-60? I think it's 60-60. So the cost will go higher and higher and higher. And you might be thinking, okay, let's go with this cost gear. Well, the thing is that the value it increases by is actually absolute. It's not being affected by the gear or anything other effect. This cost is just gonna be straight up plus 10, plus 10, plus 10. So even if I had the discount like 60% down to 20, every other garden would cost 10 wood more, 10 gold more. Okay, so the second one would be 30-30, the third one would be 40-40, and so on. So yes, you can still go with the cost, but remember you're taking it only from the base value. So if I had to go like Hadrian and Persepolis, that would be like, let's say 20%. Sure, you're saving like 20 resources per garden, but I feel like it's just better to get those gardens up and running as soon as possible, because first of all, they generate food. So every second you save, you get extra food. Plus, the sooner you get them, the sooner their train rate effect or train time effect will become active. Okay, so the sooner you get them, the sooner you get the train time effect, and you'll be producing your villagers faster, you'll be producing your military faster. It's definitely a lot more useful. But of course, it's again up to you, because the base build time is like 30, so if this goes down to like by 10 seconds, and remember I'm not including the gear again, so it's gonna be slightly less. Yeah, you can still go with the cost. I guess it's not that bad, but it's not as good as you might think. Okay, I just prefer the build time. Gardens are quite expensive. You don't wanna like go with them like early. You just wanna get them as soon as possible, but you don't wanna go with as many early. But if you forget to build them, yeah, the build time definitely is gonna help you a lot more. And yeah, most of the gardens, when they are the most expensive, are in golden age, and at that point you just need big economy for that, so it should not be the problem. And once you have the big economy, yeah, you just want to build them as soon as possible. That's how I see it. So yeah, that would be the last structure, I believe. Hopefully I did not miss any. If you feel like I missed anything, remember it might be that you might look at them as a production structure. Maybe I think I did not mention markets. Yes, again, those could fall beneath the production structure, so usually I do markets like architect manual. You can look at it them that way. Of course, I think I forgot to mention like Babylonians with the gardens. I don't like going like, sure, the gardens reduce the train time of your military units production and all the units, but you need to have them. That's the problem. You need to be Bronze Age to get the first 4, then you need to be Silver Age to get another 4, and so on and so on. So I still feel like the train time works there, okay, or train rate, okay. So yeah, don't go crazy, but hopefully I did not forget anything else to mention. So yeah, production buildings, remember those. The TCs, most important. Watch posts, defensive structures, tech structures, houses, storehouses, farms, wonders, and then specific structures. So if you feel like I miss a structure, it might be because it falls beneath any of these categories. So remember, it could be like, let's say, Persian Immortal Camp, of course, military production. It could be Persian War Academy, that could be both production and the tech structure. Just remember to look at these, and maybe you'll be like, oh yeah, it could be like this, or maybe I'm using it like this, so maybe it would make more sense to use it like this. So yeah, I hope you find this very useful, and if you did, please press the like button. If you want to see more, subscribe to the channel. Tell me what you think. Do you feel like I missed some other specific pieces of gear? I hope I mentioned everything that I could think of and did not forget anything. But yeah, if you feel like I forgot something, maybe you have some better ideas for some other structures. I just feel like there are no better options for these structures. I just don't see anything better, okay? So maybe you can open my eyes and tell me, like, what am I missing? Who knows? Maybe something interesting will be figured out, okay? Okay, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.